I recently wrote a piece about how roguelikes can actually make you a better person and teach you interesting life lessons. And I got a suggestion, maybe turn that into a video to give that kind of concept a greater audience to reach to. So that is going to be our subject for today's critical thought. And I guess the alternate title could be How to Get Good at Real Life. We have seen a huge explosion in terms of diversity and design from the roguelike genre over the past decade. From action roguelikes to deck builders, FTLs, Spelunky, Slay the Spire, Dead Cells, you name it. There's been a lot of these games. And one of the things I found very interesting is, having played them, I do think there are some very useful life lessons people can get from them. And I spoke more about this in my written post that you'll find linked to in the description down below. But one of the things about roguelike design that I think is very important, or is a very useful life lesson, is being able to understand and accept failure. And for a lot of people, failure is this impossible to understand concept that you either win all the time or, nothing else happens. And one of the things I think is so hard to kind of grow or train somebody to accept is that you're going to fail. And we've seen this with a lot of people who cannot handle failure in any way, shape, or form. And roguelikes in their base element is about failure. You are going to die. You are going to fail. Many of them, you are going to fail probably in the first 5 to 10 minutes of playing, or your very first run of it. And this kind of, variance in terms of plays, I think is still very much an alien concept to a lot of people. If you watch YouTubers and streamers who don't often play roguelikes or games that are built on procedural content and events, they often get very flustered with this idea that, hey, this run you're playing, you're going to lose. Doesn't matter what's going to happen, you're going to lose. The footage that you're seeing up there is from the game Gloom, and one of the bosses in that game says the perfect line, and they go, you're just going to keep dying over and over again until you give up. And I felt that was the perfect encapsulation of one of the major myths of roguelike gameplay that we're going to talk about more in the second half of this video. But being able to accept that you're going to fail and learn and grow from it is a very essential character trait, I feel, especially in today's world. I have failed plenty of times with things I've done in the past, and it didn't really stop me. I just put it in the loss column, think about it for a few seconds, and then I move on to the next thing, and I take what I've learned and I apply that going forward. So the second thing that roguelikes can really train and hammer home as an essential point about real life is being able to learn how to adapt and pivot to a situation. Going back to the last point that I said, a lot of people who don't play procedurally based games or games that provide variance in terms of each playthrough tend to suffer when things get thrown in a different way. They get thrown a curveball. And the very best roguelikes in their design are about keeping the player on their toes, be it through whatever item you pick up in the Binding of Isaac, new cards in Slay the Spire, whatever buffs and perks you get in Hades. But the point is that where you start and where you end up are going to be vastly different with each run of a game, especially, again, of really good roguelikes. Lesser examples in games that kind of mess up when it comes to procedural generation is when there's not enough variance to make the runs feel different, or make them feel like the player has to keep changing their strategy. You should not just be using one strategy every time you play that's going to win or lose every single time. And for a lot of people out there, it is very hard to change your routine or move to a different strategy if what you first tried didn't work. For a lot of people out there, the second they mess up with something, they're done. It is completely shut down, give up, we're finished. But one thing that I've had to learn, going back to the first point about accepting failure, is that you have to keep going. Just because option A didn't work doesn't mean that option B, C, D, E, F, and so on wouldn't. I mean, that's how I started writing books and doing my presentations, and even going onto YouTube. It's always about being able to change and adapt with the times. And roguelikes, again, are a really solid way of training you to understand that you're going to get thrown a curveball and you're going to have to deal with it, be it a good one or a bad one. And like I said, with the last point about learning from failure, these are, I think, very important character traits for people to understand. And as a third point, probably the more depressing of the three that I'm going to talk about, roguelikes teach you, unfortunately, that sometimes you are going to lose, and there is not a damn thing you could have done to prevent it. We've all had that run in Darkest Dungeon, or XCOM, or pick any kind of roguelike-based games where things are just not working. You're not getting any weapons you need, you're getting every bad roll. Basically, the entire game is out to get you on that run. Or, aka, for me, XCOM luck. And when that happens, you just gonna have to, sigh, hit restart, and keep going with a different run and hope things are better. And while I may say it very quick and brisk, like that, there are people, again, that they cannot handle failure. That they will go their entire lives without anything bad happening to them, without losing, without getting, less than A plus on their report card. And when they do mess up, or if something happens that they can't control, their entire life is shattered by it. And again, I can certainly name some examples of things that I've seen over the last year or two of this very point. That just because something bad happens, you have to have the emotional and mental maturity to be able to handle that. And roguelikes are a very great, and I guess a teaching through pain method that you are going to lose. There are people who have hundreds of runs in a game like Spelunky or the Binding of Isaac, and they've never beaten the game. For me, I think I beat the original Spelunky all the way after, I think, like 20 hours of playing that game. And there are people who are still never making it to hell. But the point is, you need to be able to understand, at least as you grow up and mature, that life isn't fair. Life isn't the ultimate roguelike. Maybe it's also the ultimate visual novel and platformer as well. But the point is, you have to be able to roll with the punches, and you have to be able to understand that things can't always go your way. And that the very best people know that, and they're going to apply their energies to try and do things better, but they're never going to get permanently hung because locked down because of one bad thing. When I have something bad happen to me, I say, yep, this was bad, it's horrible, I think about it, and then I move on to my next strategy. I never internalize a failure or make it the driving point of my obsession, because that's not really healthy for anyone involved. So, with that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk more about how all this can be applied to one of the major myths that people associate with roguelike design. A myth that I covered in my book, Game Design Deep Dive Roguelikes, which, if you want to learn more about my books, well, here you go. For entry-level students, we have 20 essential games to study, and then the Game Design Deep Dive series that takes an extensive look at different genres, with horror coming by the end of 2021. In the first part of this video, I mentioned the myth about difficulty, and using the Gloom example of a lot of people think roguelikes are you're just going to keep dying over and over again until you give up. And when I originally set out to write Game Design Deep Dive Roguelikes, it was very much because I read an article on Gamasutra from somebody just writing everything wrong about roguelike design. They were complaining that the game was too difficult, that all you do is die, they're unfair to play. And the whole time I was reading that, I was just going, no, in my head. And returning to today's topic about how roguelikes can make you a better person, I want to talk about, or dispelling that myth about difficulty. And why, when you watch people who play roguelikes of any kind really well, you probably notice they have a higher than normal clear rate, or success rate when they play. And it's not because RNG is being fairer to them or they've hacked the game or anything like that. But it's because they have learned how these games work. The point about roguelike design, what makes it so different from other games, is that a lot of the progression in them is on the player rather than on the character. As I said in the first part, one of the reasons why you are going to learn by failure is that you need to be able to understand the rules and the systems of a roguelike in order to have any chance of winning it. And this is why you're going to lose when you're first playing it, because, well, you don't know those rules. And for a lot of people who only look at roguelikes as being extreme difficulty, they're really not. And one of the bigger trends that we've seen over the last 5 to 6 years has been this growing idea of a roguelite experience. Games like Rogue Legacy, Undermine right here, and other examples that have that roguelike element of having to learn the rules and grow to master them, but they balance that with in-game progression that allows people who do figure these things out faster to make progress easier and will get much further at a quicker rate and don't need to rely on these persistent elements. With Undermine here, the footage that you're watching right now, this is from our very first night of playing this game at the 1.0 version, and I beat the game, I think, in that one single stream. I mean, when I say beat, I mean I went all the way through and got a successful run. And that wasn't because I got super lucky with RNG, or again, I broke the game. That was because I played this game enough to understand the rules and what the game wanted me to do, and then I just apply that to this latest version. And again, you'll see this in any game that has RNG and randomized elements for you to adapt to. Darkest Dungeon, XCOM, and I'm sure there are other examples that my mind is failing to remember right now. But when I play Darkest Dungeon, again, it is very rare at this point when I play the game to have a full party wipe, because I know what I need to do in the game to succeed. I also know how far to push things before I say nope and get the hell out of Dodge. But that information, you're not going to learn that the second you start playing any kind of roguelike or roguelite driven game. You need to learn that through play. And for the people who do learn that and they learn to adapt to whatever the game throws at them, they're going to have a far easier time of playing it. Now, the beauty about roguelite design, as with the example right here, is that if you aren't an amazing player, you need that help, it is available for you. And while RNG will still be a factor, it can be mitigated through the game, as opposed to traditional roguelikes and action roguelikes, where it's all about the player mitigating it. To wrap things up for today's video, roguelikes are really good at training or teaching someone how to adapt and understand failure, and in response, being able to grow and change or be ready when life throws them a curveball. And what we've seen again with the rise of roguelite design and more games applying these kinds of elements is that the extreme difficulty myth that a lot of people have said that kept them from playing roguelikes, and just the kind of quote-unquote nichiness, I'm not sure that's a real word, of the genre can be mitigated through different designs and more approachable elements to it. Again, this is why roguelite design has become such a popular a subgenre to a subgenre. And we're seeing AAA developers or larger scale examples of this. At the time of me recording this video, the game that a lot of people have been talking about is Returnal by House Marquee, and how it makes use of roguelike design with a third-person shooter. Unfortunately, I don't have a PS5, so I can't check it out in person. But the point is that the days in which you could, stick your nose up or turn away from roguelike design, I think have passed. And we are seeing developers get very creative with having these various elements that may be, very spiky or annoying to some people, still work for a larger audience. So my question for you, can you think of examples of roguelikes that we haven't mentioned that have done a really good job of being very appealing to a larger market than just the hardcore fan base? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out our Discord and Patreon link down below, especially if you want to chat, suggest topics for future videos, and so on. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.